Hello and welcome to 52 Weeks. This week we're going to be continuing through Chapter 4 in the Parks, Civic, and Open Spaces. And specifically we're going to be looking at the next 6 weeks on the types of parks and public space that are discussed in Chapter 4. So a good portion of this chapter is looking at public space. We're looking at the green space in a connected way. These areas are the types of public space that's listed in this chapter. It ranges from the large parks, the linear parks, the neighborhood parks and playgrounds, the streetscapes, the plazas and squares and campuses. So there's 6 topics that this chapter is going to be looking at, and we're going to take this next 6 weeks to go through these. This first week we're going to be looking at large parks, number 1, and we're going to understand how they fit together in the total of 3 existing parks and 2 proposed parks that are in the comp plan. It's one thing to understand that this is an idea, as comp plan is kind of recommendations, and it's also taking in consideration the existing structure that we have. We must recognize, as we looked at the natural resources and historic resources from Chapter 3, that we've inherited a green legacy. That we have a park system that actually should be highly valued and is really irreplaceable compared to other cities in the area around central PA. The Greenbelt itself is just a gem that is sometimes underappreciated and also underutilized. This is something that's really well established. It was established a century ago. It connects our city spatially. It kind of wraps around as a belt, wraps around our city. There is an ongoing effort that is necessary to secure this park system as a national historic landmark. It should be treated as such, as something that's really valuable for our residents. The goal of 4.8 is prepare a parks master plan. Now this is going to be looking at how all of the parks interrelate, and we want to understand that a park system should bring the focus on the ecological systems that are there, the cultural influences, and what has made the park and actually brings our neighborhoods together, and also looking at economic sustainability, is how do we continue to maintain our parks. And then there's a cost involved to our parks and maintenance and also the use of those, and we have to understand that balance. And we can see that at the national level with the National Park Service. How do we continue to maintain these? So even the parks that we already have, there's the Greenbelt and also the 3 parks that are existing, already have caretakers of that. And that needs to be expanded upon. And I believe some of that is through education and continue to show that legacy and the value of that legacy. There's also an idea here in thematic programming for each park to provide an attractive use for each of the parks and also prevent duplication of uses. It doesn't make sense if we have the same type of park or space, green space, in 3 different locations. It actually makes more sense to harness each unique location and build on that. And that's where the 2 new parks that are proposed even build into that as well off of the existing 3. So why is the parks plan important? We understand that these 3 parks and the 2 other proposed ones provide unique experiences for the individual adjacent neighborhoods. This is also residents of the entire city, the capital region, and the entire state. These can be places where people want to come and visit. There are events that happen in any of these locations, the Reservoir Park, the Wildwood Park, and also City Island, that do attract visitors from out of state or around the state as well, and in the region. So this is part of what should be in the master plan, is how do we figure out the best way to reach those people, but also understand how do we balance this for residents and these amenities for residents from within, and all that within an economic stability. So in the comp plan, we look at the green space system or systems thinking, and what we can do is tie together City Island as a water park that provides a river experience, not as a water park of a amusement type, but one that gets you connected to the river and the ecological experiences that are there. Wildwood Park is also this wetlands environmental experience that can be harnessed. The Reservoir Park is the cultural offerings and a hilltop experience. We've got the National Civil War Museum that's up there, but also it provides many amenities with local public parks and playground, and also basketball courts and handball courts. This has a really unique position for itself in the city. The proposed Southern Green is a proposal to address the karst, the underground sinkholes, that geological site. We also understand that there's hazardous sites in there because that was the former industrial areas of Harrisburg. Another proposed area is the Central Green. This is connected to the Paxton Creek watershed, and this is at the location between her and State Street along Cameron. So our first park that we're going to be looking at is City Island. So this is the concept of a river destination. The programming should have activities that have a combined focus. Currently, as it's listed in the comp plan, there's a lot of things happening on City Island. It just never had a conceptual idea of what it could be. It currently is programmed with a baseball stadium that gets a lot of publicity, and that's a real big draw. Same with the parking garage that's on the south of it for a lot of city employees. We've got the riverboat, we've got retail shacks, soccer fields, miniature golf, horse stables. We got the bathhouse and the concrete beach. So we also have the seasonal pleasure boat docks. So this is really a mix of uses, and it's always been kind of haphazard, even when I grew up in this area, to figure out what City Island is as a destination. There's a lot going on here. We also have the connections of east and west. This is in the Walnut Street Bridge, and it's currently not connected to the west side of City Island because it was damaged in a river storm and flooding of 1996. And we also have the Walnut Street Bridge that currently connects it, and we have a proposed rail trail as the Cumberland Valley Railroad Bridge. Back in 2012, City Island was studied by the Urban Land Institute in its best practices in understanding how urban land is used. They suggested a master plan. One of the considerations in the comp plan is to go beyond that and understand how this thing sits within the river and the entire riverfront. There's also a recommendation for perimeter park and trail and management that should be part of how this thing runs and sustains itself, but that is recommended in the comp plan to go beyond into a park management system, so that all these things are seen in a larger parks maintenance and management system. So one of the things, this park needs management to become a jewel of the park system. Revenue generation should consider this maintenance of this jewel. And so as people are using this and enjoying this facility, this environmental piece in the Susquehanna River, that the surplus for that is also going to other parks. An example in the comp plan is talking about the Tivoli Gardens in Copenhagen and looking at how do you bring amusement and nature together, and it just attracts a lot of people so that there's some revenue generation that supports other parks around the system. And that's known in when someone visits this, that it's interconnected to these other parks. So the Susquehanna Institute should be created for research, history, conservation, and ecology. This is a recommendation that it brings a focus to the river and in a way that hasn't been seen, and connects to the Susquehanna River Basin as well. And we really need to build places that support water recreation. And we understand that there's a lot of ecological issues within the river, but it's also a big place for boating and canoeing, kayaking, and other various water sports. City Island also has this Cumberland County Railroad Bridge, which has always been out there as a possible elevated parkway that's an alternative for transportation and recreation. A design study is really necessary in this because we've really got to vision and consider what the impact might be for autonomous vehicles and providing a more walk and bike friendly Harrisburg, and what does that look like in connecting the east and west shores. We've got to be really forward thinking in this and connecting everything back together, and City Island sits in the middle of that. So our next park that we look at is Wildwood Lake. It gets an estimated 85,000 visitors per year. It started as Wenzel's Swamp when Warren Manning looked at this 500 acres of this swampland. In 1907, the first paths opened. It contained baseball fields, a zoo, riding stables, boating operations in the lake. So as it grew, back in 1987, the Friends of Wildwood were established to kind of be caretakers. And then in 1999, the All Wine Nature Center opened, and really has been a main factor for conservation in here. How do we connect the park back into other parts of the township, Susquehanna Township? There's some key connectors that can happen over the 81 connections that are there and 322 connections. So that's something to be considering. How do we connect this back into neighborhoods and back up into Lingelstown and Lingelstown Road? Wildwood Lake is something that we're focusing on because there's a need to protect the existing ecology there with the swamplands and wetlands, and really protecting nature. There's amazing nature walks that are up there. Also understanding that it's floodplain protection that's in there, providing that for the city. And it also, again, looking at strengthening connections back to the residents. How do we connect residents in Harrisburg, and how does it become used by them and seen as a resource? When we look at this last of the existing parks, the Reservoir Park is important. As Manning says, and there's a quote pulled out of the Harrisburg Comp Plan, the most important landscape features outside of and near the city limits is the ridge upon which the City Reservoir Park, the great summer playground of all of the people, is located. From its summit, the highest point near the city, there's a fine panorama of the distant mountains, the river, town, and the ridge. So this is really amazing space to be if you're up here. I remember the days when they would do Kite Fest up on this area, and just being up on this vantage point and seeing the amazing landscape that is Central PA and the city of Harrisburg, the urban and the rural mixing together. The idea in Reservoir Park is to build a more accessible walkway linkage between the National Civil War Museum, the Reservoir Park Mansion, and build some of those existing uses so there's more interactivity. So one of the things that's recommended within the comp plan is that a national consultant come in to look at optimizing the utilization of the museum. And there's also some connections that should be made with the band shell and the artist village that's on site. This is something that could help the park grow and become a neighborhood resource as well as a city resource. So this park has already gone through some master planning already during the time that the comp plan was happening. You want to look at designing separate entries and paths for pedestrians and cars to kind of separate how one moves through here. Creating a clear path system through the park is necessary. Open all the vehicular gates and design roadways to slow traffic. And then lastly, looking at redesign the vehicular paths to slow down traffic and understand how people get to this park and where they park, and also use the museum and band shell. So all these things need to be thinking through in a master planning effort. Currently, I know there's been talk, and it is difficult to try and keep cars from just cutting through this area. Going from Market Street up to State Street back and forth has always been an issue. And I know that they've been dealing with that with their master plan that they went through. Again, this is something to be considering. How do we do a design that focuses on mitigating that, or pushing the vehicular traffic out to the edges? These are all design issues that could be looked at. Reservoir Park also should be partnering with the local schools to explore the opportunities to engage with the botanical, horticulture, or nutritional curriculum that's out there. And one of the exciting things is the Homegrown Harrisburg group that's been happening in the areas of permaculture, urban agriculture. There's also youth programs that can be built for the greenhouse and possible nursery. And we look at hydroponics, aquaponics, and also native plant growth for the neighborhoods and ecological green infrastructure needs. So all these are exciting things to be focused on. How do we connect and help youth and children and youth understand a civic engagement? And this can all be done with a huge resource that we have right in our own backyard. For this last part of Reservoir Park, tied into education, so the possibility lies in here with the former Bishop McDevitt building could have been connected to the Reservoir Park, and programming could have related to the recreation that happens at the park and the local activities that are in there, as well as any nonprofits that could have been using the park and using the building. The property itself had the fields in the back. Of course, there's a greenhouse that's on the side that we've already talked about. There's a gym, there's a pool. All these facilities could have been linked back into something that builds on the recreation that's currently in the park itself. And there's also the possibility for direct connection with pedestrians between Market and the park, as well as State Street and the park.